All right, one more thing. The Heat are playing well, but has it forced some tough decisions about the rotation when Norm Powell returns? We'll talk about that next.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Join the Cookie Gang, become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every day, Monday through Friday, and signing up for the Everydayer Club with the link in the show notes. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio. I'm here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. Recording this Monday morning after the Heat's big win over the Detroit Pistons on Sunday night. David and I recorded a great post-game show after that one on Sunday night. So if you haven't checked that out, it is up on YouTube and in your podcast feed. We got into a lot of stuff, including what is really fueling Miami's 5-game win streak and what it means overall for their place in the Eastern Conference standings and whether or not they can make a run in the Eastern Conference. But we got one more thing to talk about today, and this comes from our listener questions from the All Access tier on the Everydayer Club. Thank you to the Cookie Gang, as always, for sending in those questions. We have a few stragglers that we didn't get to at the end of our post-game show yesterday. This one comes from Malachi, who writes in, what a huge last couple of wins for this Heat team. Has Norm Powell lost his spot in the starting lineup when he returns from this injury? What should the starting lineup be when everybody is healthy going down the stretch here and to end the regular season? We got another question about any idea when we're getting Norm back, and what do you guys think, and what do you think if he comes off the bench? So let's start with when Norm comes back, I guess, is maybe the most important part here, David. We don't know. In classic Miami Heat fashion, we've got Erik Spoelstra giving us he's making progress every single day. And that's all. That's all we're getting. It is the groin strain that's held him out for the last few games. He was starting. Tyler Herro was coming off the bench prior to this injury. Since Norm went down, Tyler Herro has ascended to the starting lineup, and he has made the most out of it. He looks every bit the All-Star that he was last year. He's shooting 50% overall, 40% from three. The playmaking has been really important, something that we talked about over the last couple of games, David. I don't know that you can take – I know you cannot take Tyler Herro out of the starting lineup at this point. There is a big question about what you do with Norm when he comes back, though.
As far as the timeline is concerned, I'm trying to determine exactly when they would – typically they'll bring him back for a home game. And obviously you've got games, 3 more home games during the stretch against Washington, Milwaukee, and Orlando. Then you go off to a road game against the Charlotte Hornets next Tuesday. And then on Thursday, you're back for a 1 game against the Los Angeles Lakers. So I don't know. I think that the approach is a sound one because a groin injury is a little bit tricky. You don't want to rush him back and then have him kind of miss more time, especially for the playoff run and trying to do whatever it is that you can during the postseason. So I'm fine with the approach regarding working him back slowly. But
he's missed all 5 games of this win. If his name was Tyler Herro, people would be doing the whole they're only winning because Tyler Herro's injured. And I'm not saying that that's the case with Norm. I'm just making a point here. But
they are saying that. Like we have had some comments saying, "Oh, Norm is one that should be traded, etc." But I think.
So again, he's been out since the 28th. A groin strain typically will take, like a mild strain will take a couple of weeks. A more severe strain could take 3, 4, 5 weeks. And again, we have no idea what the level of strain is. Erik Spoelstra did say something that because they got ahead of it, he feels like the recovery time might be shorter than it normally is, which leads me to believe that maybe it's leaning on to the more serious side of the groin strain, right? Maybe that 3 to 5 week timeline as opposed to the more minor one. So if it's, let's call it 3 weeks that he's out, he's been out since the 28th. So it's been roughly a week so far, a little bit more than a week so far. That means maybe next week at some point coming back.
See, I think it's beyond that. I think Monday the 23rd against the San Antonio Spurs at home.
Yeah, you're right. Because like to your point, you're in Houston on the 21st, right? Yeah, maybe around there. So we're talking about mid to late March here.
Yeah, so sometime, and that's fine. Let him recover. Let him figure it out. And I like something that players do when they're hurt is, and Norm has been at these games, so it's not just that he's there as an emotional support or anything like that. Like players especially veteran players like Norm, they can see things differently when they're on the sidelines. They see the minutia of the game differently because they're not out there, they're not involved, and they can kind of understand what their role is and make those kinds of necessary adjustments. So when they do return, they'll be able to figure it out. And I think Norm is smart enough to have that kind of self-awareness and to be able to kind of get into the minutia, like I said, and understand exactly how he can develop a little bit differently his chemistry with the players that will be available. I think as far as the overall question, like I hate sounding like a prisoner at the moment because I was just fine with Tyler coming off the bench when he was after he's returned after having missed a number of games. And that was when Norm was available, but then Norm gets hurt. And obviously you have to bring Tyler back into the starting lineup, and he's thrived in that role. So I don't want to just feel wishy-washy about it, but I just don't know how else you can put Norm back in the starting lineup. I think there's concerns about that because the defensive issues I brought up before, I think those are still going to be there. You can't have Tyler and Norm out there because you're taking away Davion Mitchell, you're taking away Drew Smith and Kasper Giannis, all of whom have been played much better defense than either Tyler or Norm Powell. And those three guards are in heavily in the rotation, and they're bringing some defensive acumen to that position. And I think you'll be removing that from the starting lineup if you just reinsert Norm back into the starting role. So I think that's a problem. I haven't seen what Norm is like on the bench because, well, he just hasn't played off the bench this year. I don't know how happy he will be to receive what could be perceived as a demotion. I don't know how he's going to play. As you see, the thing is, Tyler thrived off the bench when he was first coming back from injury because he was able to develop that two-man game with Kel'el. He was a much more easy facilitator between him and Jaime, etc. Norm is not that kind of playmaker. It's not to say that he can't, but it's just not the strongest part of his game. He's more of a, you know what, give me the ball, I'm going to launch it, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to drive to the rim, etc. So you're kind of expecting him to develop into more of a playmaker, but at the same time, you do have the backup point guard who would be able to facilitate a little bit more, and Jaime has thrived in that regard as your backup point also. So he's a guy who can also initiate offense. So this might be a convoluted way of saying it, but you have to look at the different ways that Norm's game can be maximized, whether it's as a starter or as a bench player. And right now, as you said, I don't think you can bench Tyler, but I also don't think you can have both Tyler and Norm in the starting lineup. So I feel like you have to keep Norm off the bench. Like I think so. I'm not. It's not that easy, and I know it's an easy choice for me to say right now, but I think that's the reality. Is as good as he's been, have him come off the bench at least for a few games, and then to see exactly how he kind of thrives or doesn't in that role, and then make the adjustment at another time. Because I'm concerned about the defensive issues that will crop up. You know, are you going to bench Pelle Larsson? I guess that's an easy choice too, but Pelle has been solid as
that's not easy. Not the way that Pelle's been playing.
Yeah, as a connector, as a glue guy, as a defensive player, etc., he brings a different edge than either Tyler or Norm. Wiggins is out, obviously, so I think that that's why Myron Gardner is in the starting lineup now, and that's probably not going to stay that way either. So I guess it all depends on at what point Norm comes back and whether or not Wiggs is available, because he needs to be back in that starting lineup as well. Yeah. And maybe you can tinker around with the backcourt to a certain degree. I don't know. Am I crazy here in thinking that it's possible for Norm to come off the bench as his primary scorer? And that's a hell of a role for him to play.
I'll give you my answer at the other side of the break. But these injuries, they've sort of been helping Erik Spoelstra with these decisions lately. And you're hoping you get to the point where that's not the case anymore. But as we're discussing here, it's a tough decision. We'll talk about it more after this. Today's episode of One More Thing is brought to you by FanDuel. College basketball is non-stop. Big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night. From early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts, there's always action on the board. And now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. You can build any college hoops parlay that you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever fits your read. You can mix spreads, totals, player props to match how you see the slate playing out. And then you can apply the profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payout. The great thing about parlays, you're not limited to just one sport on FanDuel. You can talk about the NBA here as we do on this show. And I'm looking at the FanDuel Sportsbook here. The Miami Heat, plus 115 to win the Southeast Division. Those are the best odds that you're going to find. You can find them to make the playoffs, make a playoff run, win 45 games. The best odds that you have of the Heat kind of riding this hot streak out to the end of the season is to win the Southeast Division. Currently, the Orlando Magic are still the favorites. Now, the Magic do have the tiebreaker over the Heat for the season. That's probably a big reason. But if the Heat just win one more game than the Magic, they're going to go ahead and probably win the Southeast Division. Plus 115. Those are pretty good odds right now. You can go safe. You can go bold. Ride the team that you've been following all season long. And if you're listening to this, it's the Miami Heat. It's your parlay, your style, now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel. Play your game. Welcome back to Locked On Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Check out the full post-game show of the Heat's win over the Pistons on YouTube or up in your podcast feed right now. David, we're talking here about what you do with Norm when he comes back. We've gotten a lot of questions about it. How you mentioned that he could see it as a demotion. It's a demotion. And it might not be, it's not his fault, right? He got hurt. That's not his fault that he strained his groin. But he was an all-star this year. This year. Like a month ago, he was in Los Angeles playing for Team World during the All-Star game, and you're going to bring him off the bench? That is a really tough sell. And I just wonder if you're Spo, the fact that you're working him back from an injury and that it is something precarious like a groin strain, right? Because this is something that can easily get tweaked again with one wrong step, you know? Yeah. I do wonder if you're just like, hey, Norm, come off the bench. Tyler did it, and he was an all-star last year. Do you just bring Norm off the bench and say, look, we got to manage your minutes, and you do that down the stretch? The problem with that approach is eventually, that's just kicking the can down the road. Eventually, Norm's going to be like, hey, man, I feel great. It's been 2 weeks of me coming off the bench. The minutes restriction's gone. Like, what are we going to do here? So at some point, even if that's how Spo starts, he's going to have to make a decision at some point here. I wonder if the answer is, all right, bite the bullet, just start Tyler and Norm. Try really Tyler, Norm, probably Pella, maybe Davion still. You make that decision. Wiggs and Bam. And you go that direction. And then you quickly start staggering Tyler and Norm. And you say, look, we're going to start this way. We're going to try to come out swinging offensively. We want Norm and Tyler Herro to combine for 12 points in the first 4 minutes of every game. And that's sort of how we're going to play to that strength. And then we're getting into our rotation pattern right away. And then we're going to aggressively stagger Norm and Tyler to make sure that one of them is on the court at all times without the other one. Because there is something to this infrastructure that they've built where it's, hey, even when Tyler was healthy coming off the bench and Norm was healthy, they had one of them on the court at all times. And then that defense of guys like Davion and Pella out there on the perimeter along with Wiggins and Bam, that is the infrastructure. That is what is helping them win games right now. So do you just go that direction and then aggressively stagger? And here's one thing that I was talking to people after the game last night about, David. This new Bam Adebayo minutes pattern, where he starts and then comes out quickly, Kel'el comes in, and then Bam comes back in to play with Kel'el. Yeah. I do want Bam was like, I don't know about this minutes pattern. Like, I'm kind of just getting my groove, and then you're yanking me, and then I'm coming back in the game. I do wonder if that's almost like setting the tone for Tyler or Norm to kind of have that same minutes pattern to the point where, okay, well, Bam's coming out, you're coming out with Bam. And if Bam's okay coming out with this weird minutes pattern, so can you, right? Like kind of Bam setting the example, right, by his actions, as we talked about so much with him. I wonder if that's something that they can do. And then you're aggressively staggering Tyler and Norm. So you've got one of your guards on the court at all times. You're aggressively staggering, as we know, Bam and Kel'el. So if you've got 48 minutes of rim protection at all times, you could go between Pella and Wiggins. So you have a great wing defender at all times. You've got Davion and Drew. So you've got one of those point of attack defenders out there pretty much at all times, other than when you start games. I think that's where it is. The problem with that, David, and I'll acknowledge it right off the bat, is I don't know, that doesn't answer how you close games. Maybe that's just a hot hand matchup scenario. But that might be how you have to open games.
I don't know. I feel like you're creating a disadvantage for yourself that doesn't need to exist. I understand that you want to put your best offensive team out there, which Norm definitely needs to be a part of. And yet I think we've seen Miami's strengths over the last 5 games that they've won be the transition that's initiated by their defense, being able to put pressure, force, be active in the rebounding battle, force turnovers, and just ignite that fast break in order to be able to score points easily. And that's how they've been able to attack opponents regularly to create an advantage. And I don't know that that's going to be available to you if you start Norm and Tyler at the same time. I don't see it. And so I'm not sure if that's a good choice, to be honest with you. Like, I know these are tough decisions to be made, and I'm glad I'm not the one making them. Because
so your answer is bring Norm off the bench then?
That would be my pick right now.
How do you sell that to a guy who's going to get?
Because he's
going to be
closing.
asking for a new contract this summer.
He's still closing. Because he's going to play a lot of minutes. Because their minutes will be staggered, but he'll also get the opportunity to shine as an offensive player. And I think he'll be able to still thrive. Like, I mean, he can still average 30 minutes off the bench. Jaime's minutes gets cut a little bit. Less minutes for Casper's, less minutes for Drew, et cetera. And at some point you just kind of figure it out. And you kind of, Wiggs will have less minutes because he'll be coming back from injury as well. You need him for the stretch run. So you cut into his minutes a little bit and you just tinker with it. So everybody's minutes go down a little bit and Norm continues to play more minutes and he'll thrive in that role. At least that's how I would have presented. Again, I don't know the nuances of how Spo is going to be able to sell it to Norm Powell. And I don't know whether or not the relationship is strong enough where he could say, yeah, do you feel comfortable about this or not? But I don't see any other way of making it work. Like, I feel like you're going to put yourself in a hole offensively and defensively by starting those guys because we know how the defense ignites their offense. And I think that's what's led to a big part of their success over the last few games. And if you take that away by reinserting Powell into the starting lineup, then you're back to what you were, the middling team that we saw not that long ago. And so I think that's a concern moving forward.
Yeah. So in lineups, according to Cleaning the Glass, where the Heat have Bam and Wiggins on the court with Powell and Herro, right? Because I think that's important. You get those two defensive guys out there, Bam and Wiggins, with Powell and Herro. The Heat have a defensive rating of 114.9. That's obviously not as good as their regular season rating of 111.4 defensively, but it would rank. Let me scroll really quick here. 18th in the NBA,
middle of the pack,
right, just below middle of the pack. That's a tough look, but when they play those four with Davion Mitchell in over 200 possessions this year, so small sample size, but something. They're a plus 7.2 net rating when they've got Bam, Wiggs, Davion Mitchell, Herro, and Powell. If you take Davion Mitchell out and replace him with Pelle Larsson, they're plus 32.8 per 100 possessions, which is ridiculous. They've only played, that's only in 33 possessions, so it's basically nothing. They basically they outscored their opponent by a point every minute that they were on the court. Or every possession that they were on the court, rather, according to Cleaning the Glass. Really small sample, can't take much from it. But those would be the options if you were going to start Powell and Herro, right? It would be either one of Davion or Pelle. And so that's the only data that we have right now in terms of the background of those lineups. It's not an easy decision. I don't know what Erik Spoelstra does. It's a fascinating thing, and maybe the best thing for them is just to hope that one of these guys is always hurt, so you don't have to worry about it.
I mean, I know Spo's response is going to be, it's a good problem to have. We've heard that from him a number of times. But it's a challenge nonetheless. Like, I understand what he's trying to say by it and trying to put a positive spin on it, but he does have to find the best combination. And, I know some injury, whether it's Tyler or to Wiggs or to somebody, is going to affect the decision because that's just invariably how it always plays out with this team. But you don't want to tinker with something too much that takes away from what we've seen over the last 5 games because they've played really good basketball during this stretch, and you want to continue to build off that. And so I think you're in danger of upsetting what has worked so well, the chemistry that has worked so well, and the style of play that has led to this success by reinserting him to the lineup.
But with the politics part of it, you're also in danger of upsetting a locker room where two guys, Tyler Herro and Norm Powell, who are both all-stars, legitimate certified all-stars, both going into a summer where they're going to be asking for new contracts. Yeah. And so as much as you might upend the chemistry on the court, and I would never accuse Herro or Powell of causing a problem in the locker room, but you just
not intentionally.
Never
just want to feel good. Yeah.
Right. So hey, this is why Spo gets an extension. This is why, it's a test of all of it, right? And we'll see what ends up happening. And I also do think that there's a fair question to be asked of, okay, from a basketball sense, what's the best version of this team? Because it's easy to say you can't do anything different while you're winning 5 straight games, but when they stumble, if they do stumble, then maybe it becomes, and that's why I think maybe they are being as patient as they need to be with Norm Powell is, hey, we're winning games right now. Let's not rush him back. Let's make sure that he is totally healthy when he comes back. And let's just get more of a sample size of what this thing looks like without him, so that when he does come back, maybe we can make a more informed decision.
Conversely, though, the flip side of that is you don't want to wait to the last second. You don't want to have like 2 or 3 games left in the season and be like, all right, now you're back to starting and everything falls apart. And you're like, okay, we're ready for the playoffs. I hope he's
Tricky.
having conversations now. Like, if I cannot, I would never expect Erik Spoelstra to take lessons from me on how to be a good locker room leader. But I feel like one thing that has to be said is that he should be communicating now. Get it done as early as possible. Just start talking to Norm. Like, he's there, be like, so what do you think? What's working? Right. Pick his brain and see, how he feels about it, and maybe get a kind of accurate read on whether Norm is at least amenable to the option of coming off the bench, where he's not going to create a stink or feel too bad about it. Because you know what? I think the flip side of maybe Norm is upset by it could be the opposite, where he's like, I don't care. They won. Have you not seen what they're looking like out there? They're winning. And I can go in there and I can still get my points and I can still do what I have to do.
Was it 2 years ago that Westbrook was like, it was my idea to come off the bench when he was playing with the Clippers, I think? He was like, it was my idea to come off the bench. That could be the way to spin it, where it's like, it was actually, and by the way, I have my doubts about that. But whatever. It's like, it could be, hey, it was Powell's idea. Like, you get these conversations, Powell's like, look, let me just come off the bench. Let me come off the bench. This is Tyler's team. I'm not going to try to step on those toes. And then that way, when you're Powell and you're his agent and you go into free agency, hey, by the way, this is not a six-man guy. He volunteered to come off the bench after coming back from a groin strain, but he is a starter, and he was an all-star last year. I don't know. Fascinating and tricky and interesting, and something that we will for sure be talking about again. Thanks for tuning in today. To one more thing on Locked On Heat, make sure you subscribe, follow Locked On Heat so you get all the latest episodes. You're going to want to tune in tomorrow, a deep dive on Bam Adebayo and his All-NBA candidacy. That's right. All-NBA for Bam, potentially. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Join the Cookie Gang and get Locked On Heat ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonheat.supercast.com to join the club.